what we're going to do is talk in this unit about the ideas of social psychology. Above this video on the module, there's a really good introduction from YouTube that's up there. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that, the fellow does a really nice job of explaining what exactly social psychology is. And I thought maybe if you were going to get sick and tired of listening to the sound of my voice, a little different voice might be good. What we're going to go with is this definition. It's a scientific study of feelings, thoughts, and behaviors of individuals in social situations. And so basically what we're going to look at are the things that affect the way the individual acts, not whole groups. That would be more sociology. Social psychology is how all those outside influences and even inside influence, if you think about feelings and thoughts, affect how individuals are going to behave. I want to talk about this by first talking about an experiment that we talked about in Psychology 101. To do that, I want to give you an example from the Second Gulf War. Abu Ghraib was a prison in Iraq, and in the Second Gulf War, the United States is going to take that prison over and use it for Iraqi prisoners that they round up. The prison guards are going to be National Guardsmen from the United States military. And what emerges months after they take over this prison are pictures like the one you see here on the slide. And it's of National Guardsmen who are being very abusive to the prisoners that they're watching after. They're even taking their own cell phone photos of just the horrible things that they're doing to these folks. And the big question gets asked: what's wrong with these people? What's wrong with these individuals? Who are these individuals that we sent over that could do these horrible things? And the answer comes back, not that it's what's wrong with these people, but it's what's wrong with the situation they were put in. They're put in a situation where they're being prison guards, not something they were trained for. They're dealing with these prisoners, again, not something they were trained for. And then this unexpected behavior happens. It probably shouldn't have been that unexpected, though, if you remember back to the Stanford Prison Experiment. August of 1971, 24 stable college-age men are split into two groups, guards and prisoners, for an experiment trying to recreate prison life. Philip Zimbardo is the man who designs this experiment. And even though the experiment is supposed to go on for 2 weeks, if you remember back, it only lasts for a couple of days because things degenerate so quickly. And what Zimbardo felt like he proved with that experiment was it's not necessarily the person that has a problem, it's the environment and what that brings out of a person. So when we talk about social psychology, that's what we're talking about. This idea that the social situation has an effect on the person themselves. And so we see this in a lot of different ways. I'd like for you to think just for a moment about maybe how your behavior changes depending on what situation you're in or who you're around. Maybe it's your behavior in a classroom as opposed to at lunch. Or your behavior in a school setting versus in a sports setting. Your behavior when you're home with family versus when you're out with friends. And I think if we're all honest and kind of reflect, we could see that, there are different ways that we're going to interact based on the situation that we're in. The question then becomes, and the one Zimbardo was asking, which is bad? Is it the person or the situation the person is put in? And so I think if you remember back to that definition we were talking about with social psychology, the social psychologist would suggest that it is the social situation that the person is put in. Let me give you an example. Famous psychological study I've got a rundown of this one on the YouTube playlist as well. But the Good Samaritan study, if you're familiar with the story of the Good Samaritan, it's a parable Jesus tells in the Bible. Samaritans, during the time he was telling this, were kind of second-class citizens. They were looked down upon by the Jewish people of the time. And so Jesus is telling this story about the Good Samaritan and him being the one that stops rather than the religious leaders who passed this poor man who has been basically mugged and left for dead on the side of the road. Was a powerful story for those folks about the people of the day. But psychologists designed a study to test this. They went to Princeton University and they were testing it on students in seminary. So these are students who are learning to be ministers. And so they bring these guys into a room, tell them that they need to prepare a short talk, 3 to 5 minutes, on the parable or on the reasons they got into ministry. They separate them into a couple of groups. One group is going to be told that they need to include a reference to the story of the Good Samaritan. The other group is not told they need to include a story or include the story of the Good Samaritan. Then a lab assistant pops in and tells them one of 3 things. For one group, they basically said, hey, the talk's going to be in a different building on campus. You've got plenty of time, but you probably need to start walking over to this other building to get ready for your talk. The second group, they come in and put a little more of an immediate need on it and say, hey, this is getting ready to happen right now. We need you to start walking over to the building as soon as you get there. Kind of this is going to start. And then for the last third of these participants, the researchers come in and are basically like, dude, you're super late. You've got to sprint across campus and you've got to get ready to do your talk in this other building. Well, what they set up was that each of these guys, as they were going across campus, were going to encounter someone, an actor who was working with the experimenters, who was beaten up in a bad way on the side of the path where they were going to be going. I think they were in a doorway, kind of holding their head, moaning. You could tell they needed help, and they wanted to see how many people would stop. Now, keep in mind that these guys are all going to be ministers, and that half of them have prepared a talk based on the parable of the Good Samaritan. And the results were shocking. Only 10% of the group in a hurry stopped to help. A little bit more, maybe 30-35% in the group that was hustling to get over there but not in a super big hurry. And still just 60% of people who had been told they had plenty of time to get across campus stopped to help. And so what we see is that the rush that people were put into has an effect on helping behavior. We're going to see a lot of other things too as we explore this that have an effect on helping behavior, but this was definitely one of them. And so it's an interesting study to look at kind of on the opposite side of the Stanford Prison Experiment, where there you've got a really bad situation. Here you've got people that should be primed to help, but because of the rush they're put into, they don't necessarily act in a way that is matches up with their beliefs. So we're going to spend some time here exploring what this means and how these things get set up, what type of effect situation has on us, and some important concepts from the field of social psychology.